The one thing to remember, of course, is that you can also have non-lapsing binding nominations, but you still have to review them. And we do actually use the non-lapsing version, and they do work well. But you have to remember that if your circumstances change, you do need to review that situation. Moving on to tax. As I mentioned earlier, your benefits in a super fund consist of taxable benefits and tax-free benefits. Now, given that there's 16.5% tax on the taxable benefits when you die, if it's paid to a non-dependent, there's pretty good incentive to try and reduce that taxable portion if you can. So, one of the common strategies which you've heard us talk about before is withdrawal and recontribution strategies. And these strategies, simply put, are taking money out of your super fund, depositing it into your account, and then putting it back into the super fund as a non-concessional contribution. Remember from earlier, that forms part of the tax-free part. When you take money out of your fund, you can't just choose the taxable component. I can't just say I want to take the taxable component. You have to take it proportionally. So that is a trap. If you take the money out and then put it back in to the same place in your superannuation fund, you end up having, you're mixing your tax-free with your taxable again. So there's some specific strategies that can be used to enhance withdrawal and recontribution strategies, which we actually have spoken about before at a previous seminar, and the detail, that is actually on our Hewison Live website, so if you're interested in having a look at that, it goes through a bit more of a detailed look at withdrawal and recontribution strategies and the benefits of them. In this case here, if your benefits were being paid to a non-dependent upon your death, and you had this scenario here, and you didn't do anything, so you didn't do this withdrawal and recontribution strategy, you'd be losing $82,500 in tax on that death benefit up here. Afterwards, after doing this simple withdrawal and recontribution strategy, the death benefit tax reduces to just over $45,000. There's a tax saving of about $37,000 just through that simple strategy. There are more complex variants of that, but it's certainly a strategy that you've got the self-managed fund, you have the flexibility to do these types of strategies. It's worth having a look at them. Your self-managed fund is going to be with you a long time. And as you know, life changes. And there's times when those life changes will require a review of your self-managed superannuation fund arrangements. The obvious one is legislation change. That's a certainty for needing to review your self-managed fund, but there's also ages at which you really do need to review what's going on in your fund and what you're doing with your self-managed fund. 55 obviously is when you can start, at the moment, getting access to your money. 60, well, that's when you can withdraw money tax-free from your super. 65, you've got unfettered access, but you can't put any more money in if you're not working. And 75 is when you can't put any more of your own contributions in. So there's specific ages that you need to be aware of when it comes to the administration of your fund and what you're doing with your self-managed fund. If you experience divorce or marriage, despite you will have to change your estate planning arrangements, but you'll also need to check your self-managed super fund. Make sure the nominations are still right. Is your binding nomination to your ex-spouse? Probably not a happy place. If you have a family dispute or a change in your family arrangements, think about your trusteeship of your self-managed super fund. Do you need to have a look? Is it appropriate to have Uncle Fred as your co-trustee now that you hate him? Maybe not. Hopefully we don't know he has to deal with this last one. But if you become bankrupt or insolvent under administration, or worse still, if you committed an offence that is related to dishonesty, and you're actually convicted of that, then you cannot be a trustee of a self-managed superannuation fund. Now, that's important because there's no way out. If it happens, you can't be trustee. Now, keeping in mind, self-managed super fund, all members have to be trustees of the fund. So if you can't be trustee, you can't be a member of your self-managed fund. Your only choice really is either to roll your money, take your money out of your superannuation fund and put it in a public offer fund, or you can convert your self-managed fund into a small APRA fund by appointing a public trustee as the trustee of the fund. That has costs associated with it. You may ask why you would do that. Well, consider a business person who has their business premises owned by their self-managed superannuation fund. It's a fairly common occurrence. If they have some issues with their business, perhaps they're being administered through insolvency with one part of their business, it means they can't be trustee of their fund. But they want to retain their business premises. They can, by appointing that public trustee, converting their self-managed fund into a small APRA fund, they can keep that structure in place. There are options, but it can be costly. The legislation doesn't tell you what you can and can't invest in, or what you can invest in with your self-managed fund. It tells you what you can't do. There's plenty of rules for what you should not do. In picking out the important ones, all your investments must be made at arm's length. They've got to be on a commercial basis. So you can't own your business property and give your business a sweetheart deal, or alternatively, charge exorbitant rent to your business through your super fund. So it has to be on an arm's length basis. You can't lend money to members or to their relatives. You can't buy assets from members, although there's an exception to that. And you can't borrow money with a self-managed fund, although there is an exception to that as well. And your fund can't have more than 5% of its investments in in-house assets. Now, an in-house asset is a loan to or an investment in a related company or trust. So think of a unit trust that might own a portfolio of shares and a couple of properties, and you're the trustee. You control the trustee of that unit trust. Your self-managed fund can buy units in that trust, so long as the total amount of assets that of no more than 5% of the super fund's assets are held in that exposure. So there can be flexible ways to use a self-managed fund to your benefit, but there are some restrictions on how you use it. In terms of borrowing, I talked about some exceptions. Limited recourse borrowing arrangements is a way for your super fund to borrow, and I'll go through that quickly in a moment. Your fund can purchase some assets from members or related parties. Property that's used for business can be purchased from a related party, as can listed shares or listed investments, listed securities. The arrangements around those transactions and the valuation methods around those transactions are changing from 1st July. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. A limited recourse borrowing arrangement is a specific structure that allows your self-managed super fund to borrow money to buy an asset. Generally, it's used to buy property, because properties cost, you need a significant lump of capital to buy a property. It's a strategy that's become more popular, particularly with small and medium-sized business owners, to buy their business premises, and whereby you use some of your self-managed superannuation fund money and borrow the rest from a lender. The structure requires the self-managed fund to borrow the money. The property is held in a custody trust by a separate trustee until that loan is repaid, at which time the property is then transferred to the self-managed super fund ownership. And the rent, in the meantime, the rental is paid to the super fund. Contributions and rent are used to repay the loan. Fantastic opportunity. This structure, it is complex, and but it's a fantastic opportunity to create wealth, particularly for younger business owners who are building themselves up and want to get as much money into superannuation as they can, but are limited by that $25,000 cap on contributions. So it's an opportunity, but it is complex, and certainly one of those areas you'd want to get some advice before you step off and start implementing it. Your super fund, a self-managed super fund allows you to pool your superannuation benefits with up to 4 other people into one investment portfolio. There's no such thing as joint superannuation. Each individual has their own benefits in their superannuation fund, and that individual benefit is maintained throughout that person's life. Probably best explained by a diagram. In this case, 2 members have pooled their superannuation benefits into one investment portfolio for efficiency and to benefit from that arrangement. But each of them have their own separate balances in the fund, and they also have separate accounts themselves within that fund. That may have occurred through a withdrawal and recontribution strategy where you're trying to quarantine that recontributed amount in a new pension perhaps. This is where a self-managed super fund becomes really attractive from a strategic perspective, because if you're really making use of your fund and driving its effectiveness, if you're taking pensions out of your fund, you want to be drawing down on the taxable pensions first, leaving your tax-free pensions for as long as possible, because then when you die, you've got less tax that's been paid by your estate. And these are all the types of strategies that we do all the time, day to day, making sure that the effectiveness of self-managed funds that we look after are being used to the maximum. Question that gets often asked about self-managed super funds is whether you should have a company as trustee of your self-managed fund, or whether you should have individuals as trustees of your fund. In years gone by, we probably led to the individual. These days, we pretty much insist on corporate trustees for all the new funds we're setting up. There's probably 3 main areas of note. The first one's cost. Corporate trustee will cost around $700 to establish. You've got a $43 annual fee that you've got to pay to ASIC to keep the company going. So there's a cost there, whereas individual trustees don't have that. So that's one reason why you might go for an individual trustee, certainly a reason that we had used in the past.